So let me talk about two principles, which are my favorite two principles to talk about these days, because without them we really can't further our rationale for a visualization practice. Do you mind? First principle is the principle of association. Second principle is the principle of habituation. Association, habituation. Principle of association. You remember the Hebbian or Hebbian axon of when neurons fire together, they wire together. Okay? What that means is that when we have an experience, all of our multi-leveled senses of the experience, that is sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, the facial recognition of other people, the subjective emotion that we're in, and the context all fire together and wire together. So you have all the emotions, the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, all the senses, the emotion, the subjective experience. Let's say it's a traumatic event and you feel completely powerless and somebody's angry. So you have the sense of powerlessness, the context, and somebody's angry face. They all wire together. Now, 20 years later, you walk in and you're waiting for somebody who's going to give you some feedback on something, and they come in and they're angry at you. And all you see is their tortured, scrunched up face. That's all it takes to do what's called reactivating the wire or the neural pathway. So what happens is one little data feedback elicits all the other associations. So in that moment, when it's just a kind of casual event situation where someone's just going to give you feedback, has an angry face, you have no idea why they're angry. Did they miss their cab? Did they stub their toe? Did they wake up and who knows? Suddenly, you're back in childhood, and all the associations, all the configuration of the data, all it took is one little bit of data, and suddenly all of them fire together. That's the power of association. And that's why we're living in a virtual reality, because we are getting little bits of data. It's not to say that it's all coming in from your mind. Okay? That's also what's called false view or unrealistic view. The problem with that kind of thinking is it leads to solipsism, that everything is just a projection of my mind. You guys don't exist. You guys totally exist, but you're coming in at a very minimal pace as an input data that's firing my brain, retrieving storage of emotions and associations, and suddenly I'm teleported back into childhood. That's the principle of association. You think it only works for the negative? Also works for the positive, which is one of the compelling reasons why training in a visualization and stimulating all our reserves, positive emotion, positive people, calling up on the data banks of all the things that did work for us, really compelling. We're going ahead of ourselves. Principle of association is, let's take one example, the one I use in a recent article I wrote. So if a dog bites you when you're a kid, you got the dog biting you, you have the pain, and you have the sense of helplessness because you're a terrified little kid. Now you're in Central Park on a Saturday afternoon and a dog is off leash before 9 o'clock and it's growling. Suddenly that's the data cue that's coming in. What's the association? All those three things, powerlessness, pain, fear, terror, it all comes up because just the dog was the cue, the growling dog was the cue. Now, what if every time after the initial impact of that dog biting you, you started avoiding all dogs no matter what? This is what I call an adaptive contract we write with ourselves. You go back into childhood right now, all of you. Every single one of you, when painful things happen, you wrote a contract with your own soul. I will never, ever let this thing happen to me again. The more painful, the deeper the contract. I will never trust again. I will never love again. I'll never put myself in a vulnerable position again. I just won't let it happen. And you've been living according to those bylaws and contracts your whole life, avoiding this or grabbing that. So now you're in the park, you're 30 years old or 40 years old or 50 years old or 60 years old, the growling dog is there, and suddenly the association rises, but you have trained yourself to run every time you feel A, you do B. You feel A, you do B. You feel A, the third time, it's not by choice. The third time and the fourth time and the fifth time, it's gone second nature. It's now intuition. It's now like, what else do we call it? Rote. It's like riding a bicycle. When you get on a bicycle, do you have to think about doing it? Second nature. How does it get second nature? You do it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Pain impact happens, you're off to the races with a very narrow band of adaptive functions of behavior. So run, compulsive shopping, sex addiction, you name it, drugs, alcohols for numbing, obsessive work hours, you name it. When you feel this, you do this. When you feel this, you do that. So this brings us full circle to what the Buddha called samsara. Everybody say samsara. Samsara is the compulsive life driven by a mind and body that have been impacted by stress and trauma. A compulsive life driven by a mind and body that have been impacted by stress and trauma. So this means that we are in adulthood, but we're not really free, because everything that's happening to us is a referent that elicits something that's already happened. I call this the revolving door. You're in a revolving door because you're not really able to experience anything new because everything has already been associated. Reality's coming through and it's firing prior associations. So we're always living in the past. Our brain is a pattern recognition machine. It wants to know, it wants to recognize something it's already seen. It's not that interested in anything new. It's not that interested in seeing reality for what it is. It's interested in defense and self-preservation. In order to have self-preservation, it has to data bank and catalog all its traumatic imprints, and it has to remain vigilant. Data bits come in, you have painful associations, so you're not in reality. And then what about the principle of habituation? You're not free there either, because you have 5 or 6 go-to strategies to deal with life that you're not even conscious about using. Feel, do, feel, do. What are you feeling? You're feeling the past. What are you doing? What you've learned in the past. Are you free? You're not free. Association, habituation. Past trauma colors our current experience, so we're not really in real time. Past habituation means that we're not really free to have new choices because the implicit or the intuitive or the second nature is compelling us to act. So feeling and acting. And check this out. This is even more incredible. The narrow, this is what I'm like focusing in on therapy these days. It's like revolutionary, my little guinea pigs. I'm just kidding, I'm a guinea pig to somebody else. I go sit on somebody else's couch. The wheel of karma comes full circle. At the tail end of what we do, we seal our fate in a revolution of the cycle. So what we do, we think, oh, I'm just doing it. It's just a beer. Oh, it's just we just hit this person. Oh, it's just another night on the town. Oh, it's just another moment of like people pleasing. Oh my God, what's going to happen? I got to take care of her and make sure she likes me. All our actions end up sealing our fate because in a way, if you look very strategically and analytically, what happens is that they sends a whole message to your psyche and to other people that confirms your worst case scenario. So let's take an example. Okay, if you were raised like me in a traumatic childhood, very frightening, very hostile, alcoholic father, right? His histrionic mother, completely anxious, throwing up flares at every little thing. My nervous system habituated itself to be on high alert. And I learned to take care of my parents because if I didn't, I was prey, you could say. I was too vulnerable. So it behooved me to make sure Daddy was pleased and Mommy was calm. I needed to do whatever it took to please my father and to make sure my mom was calm and she had everything she needed so that maybe at the tail end of that, they would love me. So that's my associations is terror, fear, panic, and shame. Terrible shame. Terrible shame. And then my associations, those are my associations, and then my Habituations are people-pleasing. Oh, little Miles going to take care of you and be nice to you. And like not raise any like untoward conflictual, we won't talk about anything that might be, provocative or anything. I have to take care of people in order to keep myself safe, and it's almost second nature. Guess who the one person is left out of the whole equation, meanwhile? Is me. Yeah, so it looks like compassion on the outside, but really it's just a reinforcement contingency that ends up leaving me feel isolated, alone, shameful, and inadequate. How does it do that? So I perceive that I'm not safe and I'm not valuable and I'm a shameful little boy, and I feel anxious when people are angry at me, and I placate them, and in placating them, I'm actually not counting or not validating or not valuing my life. And the whole thing reinforces itself. Did you see that? Should I slow it down again? If I take care of everybody to my own exclusion, I'm becoming my parent that really didn't take care of me. I had a narcissistic alcoholic father. Do you think he cared about me? There was only one person that he cared about. One. Not mom, not brother, not me, nobody. One person. I was left out. So when I'm busy taking care of everybody else and burying my needs, or like, oh, I would like to be loved or cuddled, or will you take care of me, or will you pay the fee, or whatever it is, and I shortchange myself and brush it under the rug, what I'm doing is denying myself in the same way that I felt denied as a child. So that's the whole reinforcement contingency. So subtle. So subtle. But I guarantee you, if you start looking into your story, the way that you're perceiving, eliciting the activation of the association, and the way that you're acting, the principle of habituation, on the tail end of that habituation process is the reconfiguration or reconforming or reinforcing principle that's driving the whole story further and further and further like a revolving door at the Ritz. So that's our negative spin on reality.